Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It looks like I have 1:30 on my clock here, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to today's webinar. Today's Unanet webinar is in the Foundation series, and we'll cover accounts payable and accounts receivable, which you'll hear me refer to as AP and AR. I'm Robin Bell. I'm part of the Unanet University team, and I kind of specialize in financials functionality. So for today's webinar, if you experience any kind of delays or a lag in response time or something, your screen stops updating, try dropping off and re-entering the webinar. Usually that will fix any issues. Today I have Patty Cantor, part of our customer success team with me. Patty, are you there?
I am. How are you?
Great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Just want to say hi to everybody, and thanks for joining us today. I also want to let everybody know that most of our customer success team is on the webinar. So if after the webinar you have other questions that you think of, you can feel free to reach out to your customer success manager for additional information.
So awesome. Thank you. Thank you. It's great to have Patty with us here today, and most of the CSM team as well. Patty's going to be responding to your questions via the webinar questions box to the right of your screen on your dashboard there. So we're going to be reviewing those all together at the end of the webinar. All right. So what are we going to talk about today? AP and AR. We're going to go a little bit through roles for AP and AR and the approval workflow, a bit on setup and configuration, and what are the kind of main pieces there that we need to think about. We are going to go into our test environment and go through some transactions, and along with that, take a look at some of our reports, and then of course our wrap up and questions at the end. So let's jump right in and let's talk about those roles. In your office, in real life, sometimes you have people who perform different functions with accounts payable and accounts receivable, and you're able to have a nice segregation of duties. That's awesome. Sometimes also in smaller companies, you might have someone who has to wear multiple hats and process a transaction from beginning to end. But it's okay. Either way, Unanet is built to accommodate either scenario. So our financial areas all have viewer, user, poster, and admin roles, okay? The viewer roles have view access only to the organization's dashboard and the reports dashboard. They cannot view transaction data from within the menu items in the financials dashboard. From the reports dashboard, they have the ability to view both account and organization hierarchies there, as well as their reports. The user role has access to the financials dashboard to create, save, edit, copy, submit, and delete transactions. Just a note, the copy function is available for some, but not all transactions, and the delete function is available only if your system properties are set to allow deletions. Users can also view organization information. The poster role can do everything the user role can do. Remember, we talked about wearing many hats. Sometimes that's necessary, but they can also post and void transactions. Then we have the administrator roles. These roles have access to organizations, bank accounts, payment methods, and a few various other items. The administrator roles typically do not have the ability to create, process, or post transactions, with a few exceptions here and there. For example, one exception would be that the AP admin is the only role, besides the system admin, of course, that can create vendor invoices from expense reports. Also note that the user, poster, and admin roles are not going to have access to the reports on the reports dashboard for AP and AR unless they also have the viewer role for that area. Approval workflow. Our financial document statuses, you may be familiar, are in use, submitted, and posted. The in-use status occurs when a document is saved and assigned a document number, and you can delete only from an in-use status because that's the only status where we can edit things, and delete is a form of editing. Same thing with attaching documentation. Documents with an in-use status are not available to view in the general ledger because they haven't been posted yet. Submitted status means that the document has been entered with all the required fields and it has been submitted for posting. This is the only status that you can post from if you have the poster role. And again, those are not available to view in the general ledger. Posted means that the document has been posted to the general ledger. You can see it in your reports. Again, only happens from a submitted status. And if you have to void something, your void is going to post automatically, which is kind of awesome. And you can copy where the copy function is available. It's available on not all transactions, but where it is available, you can do that from any status by using the little eyeglasses icon, go in and view, and then you'll have a copy button there. Organizations. The AP user and poster roles have the ability to view organization data from the organization dashboard, but they can't make any changes. So you see from my screenshots here, from that role, they only have the eyeglasses and no edit pencil. The administrators for AP and AR can add or make updates to the organization data. You see that they do have the edit pencil there. The most important piece of information for transactions is the customer profile for customers and the vendor profile for vendors. Without the customer or vendor profile, you're not going to be able to process transactions, even if the organization exists and you have an org type of customer. You see there on your screen, we have an organization type. If you don't have the profile, you won't be able to do your transactions. It's the critical piece of setup. So within that customer profile menu, what you do is you have to associate this customer with one or more legal entities. The system is looking for that legal entity information as part of the business logic when using financial organizations. So you can select just one legal entity, or if you have multiple, you can do one at a time, or the default is all legal entities, which you can certainly do that as well. Our example here on the screen shows a customer, but the same is true for vendors as well. So moving on to bank accounts, AP and AR administrators have the capability to add or modify bank account information in the admin setup accounting menu. You should set up bank accounts for each real-life bank account from your brick and mortar banks, and you need to have at least one account designated as a type of bank with the checking account field selected if you plan to generate accounts payable checks out of Unanet. Payment methods. Again, the AP and AR administrators have this functionality available to them to add or modify payment method information under the admin setup accounting menu. So you should really set up payment methods to mirror the way that payments come and go in or out in real life. So for example, on the AP side, you might have system checks or manual checks, ACH payments, wires, who knows what else. On the AR side, you could have hard copy checks coming in, or maybe ACH transfers that are coming directly into your account from the customer. So the payment method is a required field when you're making vendor payments or receiving customer payments transactions. The user and poster roles don't have access to the admin dashboard, so they're not going to be able to see information for payment methods or for bank accounts. So a few other pieces of financial setup that we will talk about. We're not going to go into big details here, but things that you might want to consider. Do you want to give the ability for users to delete in-use transactions? Some people say yes, some people say no. I say yes because if you delete it, it's not impacting the GL. You're not having any impact on the financial statements. Yeah, your numbers are out of sequence. That's really up to you. That's a property setting. Duplicate checking. On the AP vendor invoice side, you can either get a hard error and say, nope, you can't move forward at all until you change something, a soft warning saying, hey, there's something in there exactly like this, sure you want to do this, or you could just say, nope, I don't want to check at all, I don't care if I have duplicates. Unposting. If you want to provide access for the system administrator to unpost a customer payment, that is available. We'll talk just a little bit about that later on. We also have 1099 setup considerations, and you also want to make sure you have the right accounts and payment terms set up before you start processing those AP and AR transactions. So if you want to know some more about these particular setup items, certainly all of that information is available in the Knowledge Center, or put that in your questions box on the webinar dashboard, and we'll try to get to those at the end. All right, so we're going to go into the system in just a minute to review a demo of transactions. But first, let me just kind of give you a quick overview of the types of transactions that you're going to see in AP and AR. So on the AP side for vendor invoices, you can enter the invoice information manually, or it can also be imported by a system admin. And we do have recurring vendor invoices, which is nice if you have, rent or something that you do every month. On the vendor payment side, you can create a vendor payment if you need to without going through the invoice process, maybe like a tax payment or something. You don't want to run that through the AP liability account. You can certainly do that. For vendor payments, you do have the 3 following types available. You have a system check, which gives you a printable PDF output on your DLT 104 format check stock. A manual check, where maybe you kind of handwrote the check because it was an emergency and now you need to record it in the system. And then anything else, basically, that you have, such as ACH wires, maybe you have a P card, something like that. On the accounts receivable side, we're going to take a look at our customer payments. So again, we'll be using the user interface to enter those, but they can be imported, certainly. And maybe your customer pays 4 invoices with 1 check. That is very, very easy to accommodate in the system. We can associate all of those invoices with that single customer payment. On the customer payment side, we have payment types of check. That does require a check number, so whatever check you received from the customer, and then again, that other payment type that kind of is anything else that comes in, such as ACH. We also have customer deposits. We'll see how much time we have if we can get to those. Those are pretty basic. Data entry of your deposit information, and then there's also an undeposited funds process. A lot of people like to use that if you receive a lot of hard copy checks and you kind of bundle those all together and make 1 bank deposit. That total amount is what's going to be on your bank reconciliation. And so that deposit, or that undeposited funds process, is certainly doable in Unanet as well. On the reporting side for AP and AR, the viewer roles, remember, have access to this reports dashboard. We see that we have both aging and activity reports for accounts payable and accounts receivable. So we're going to take a look at those in the system as part of our transactions process. So now we're going to be going live into our Unanet environment, take a walk through some of the transactions. So I just want to suggest, if you have 2 screens available and you have like a test environment or environment where you just kind of want to follow along, please feel free to do that. I'm going to try not to go too fast, although we do have a lot to cover, but sometimes it's helpful for you to see kind of in your own environment what these things look like. So let me come on over to our test environment. All right. So we're logged in right now as our AP user, Victor Voucher, and you can see he has a limited menu. He has the reports menu, which tells me he also has perhaps the viewer role. Of course, he would have his own user reports anyway, but he has a limited menu up here. Then if you're used to going in as an administrator, you see a lot of things up top here. So we're going to go and enter a vendor invoice, pretty basic. And so we're going to go into our financials menu, hover over accounts payable, and you see he's got a limited menu here as well, and go into vendor invoices. Very consistent with the rest of Unanet. If I want to add something, I've got a plus sign up here, and I'm going to add a vendor invoice. So one of the great things about using financials is that your financial transactions might also have projects. So we're going to show that in adding a project code in on our vendor invoice here, and that will actually show up on your project accounting reports. So again, we're in as the AP user. I start typing in the vendor name. So you can see when I start typing any character, that anything with that character string is going to show up. So my vendor is Highway Software here, and I click on that. Remember that the vendor name is not going to populate here if you don't have a vendor profile defined within that vendor organization. You also may or may not have noticed, as soon as I selected that vendor, my payment terms defaulted in. That is also a piece of the vendor profile. I can change them if I need to on this individual invoice. Let's go ahead and enter our amount and the invoice or reference number. So let's see what's my invoice number is. And then my invoice date. That's going to be on your invoice. Now, as soon as I in the invoice date, you see that my due date populated based on my payment terms. If I change the payment terms, let's say to net 10, you can see that the system will calculate your due date based on the payment terms, in this case 10 days from the invoice date. Let me put that back to where it was. And your description field. You don't have to put something here, but I like to, you know, have something here so people know what did we buy? What was this for? Was it goods? Was it services? What was it? Alrighty. So over here you saw our payment terms. On the top right, our accounts payable section. This is going to default in from your posting group setup. So this is my credit side of the entry, my AP liability account, and the organization that that's going to. These are changeable. If anybody who's on the call has ever been in my classes, you'll hear me say, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So I wouldn't recommend changing these unless you have a really good reason you want this to go to a different liability account. There's a reason that we kind of have that set up behind the scenes. It is changeable. There's a few other things here we'll talk about later that we're not going to worry about at this moment. The dates, however, we do want to talk about. Those are very important. The document date and the post date. Document date is really up to you based on what your internal business process is. When I used to run an AP shop, I like to have the document date as today. You see it defaulted in as today, but you can change. You can certainly change it. That told me what day it was entered into the system. So I left that as today, but that's really up to your internal process. The post date, some people like to leave that as today. Some people like to put it as the last calendar day of the month or even the last business day of the month. Whatever makes sense to you and your company, that's what you should do. Okay? The post date is driving what day this transaction is or what period this transaction is being posted to in the general ledger. So that's very, very important. So I'm going to save this. As soon as I hit the save button, the system's going to assign a document number. So this is my vendor invoice, which is document type VI, document number 519 here. And you can see all of my summary information is here. I can still change it if I need to, just flipping back and forth on my menus. Okay. So attachments, this is kind of awesome. I can go and attach the copy of my invoice just by going to browsing, finding the invoice, and saving that. I don't have to have those cabinets full of files or binders anymore. I can attach everything right here. My poster can go in and see it. My auditors can go in and see it. It's fantastic. So highly recommend using that. That's also available for your journal entries and some other customer payments, some other financial documents. But we need to put in the details for this journal entry, or sorry, for this vendor invoice, so we know where the debit side of the entry is going. So if it doesn't relate to a project, let me show you that first. So let's say this is a G&A other expense. Where was my G&A? Do I have G&A other? There it is, G&A other. Okay, and let's just call it MyCo. So you put in your account and your organization. You can see my reference, description, date, and amount fields all came from here. If this total invoice amount of $3,300 is split into 2 lines, I can certainly add another row here. You know, say part of this is shipping or something, and so 3,000 of it is my software and 300 is shipping or something. I can certainly do that. But what I wanted to show you was this particular general ledger code that I used, account code, in the account setup for 80.03.14 does not have that it requires a project. So it won't even let, I'm clicking furiously here, it won't even let me put a project in. So that's what I want to show you. The only field you have out here would be person if there's a person associated with this transaction. Now, if, let me wipe this out, if I do have a project required, and I'll go back so it kind of forgets that I put that in there. Let me put in, this is maybe a direct cost, and it's going to my ODCs, direct other costs for the IT organization. You see, I'm just typing in, you know, a portion of the character string, and it's giving me options to pick from. Now you can see that my project field is open. And since this general ledger code requires a project, I'm going to have to put a project in here. So thankfully, I know which project it is. And I'm not sure exactly which task, but I'll know if I see it, so I can use my wildcard here. That's going to give me the available tasks here. So let's just choose one there. The project type is going to default in from this space station project profile. And the expense type is required when you have a project code in use on this line item. Remember, the expense type is going to be your link to the cost structure and those project accounting reports, so it's a required field when you're entering this on a vendor invoice. So if nothing populates here, you want to contact your system administrator because there's some setup missing behind the scenes. In this case, there's something here, but it doesn't really look right, right? I'm buying software and I have cell phone popping up here. So that's okay. All I need to do is, again, use my wildcard, and it will give me all of the appropriate behind the scenes setup things. Oh, look, there's software. So I can go ahead and click that. And that way it's going to go to the right place on my project accounting reports once it's posted. So now we've got everything populated. We can go ahead and submit it. And these aren't yet available on the aging, of course, because they're not posted yet. But you can see it takes us back to the invoice entry screen, and it's retained, you know, a little bit of my information here, the document date and post date that I had selected for that one. So I'd love to show you every variation that we can, but we have a lot of things to cover. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to vendor payments for now. If you have any questions on vendor invoice entry, please go ahead and put those in the questions box on your webinar dashboard. And with Patty's help, we'll go ahead and get to those at the end. So still in this Victor voucher, I'm going to generate some system checks. So the AP user has the ability to create payments. I'm going to go to bulk vendor payment creation. If you have ever run an AP shop, you know that you don't want to create vendor payments one at a time. You want to do as many as you possibly can all at once. So thankfully we have that available to us. I'm just going to throw my due date out ahead of here. We're in a test environment, so we'll see what we have out there. But you can see I have many, many options for my criteria. I can do a specific vendor invoice or vendor org, invoice a specific document number or range of document numbers. You know, you can go through all the criteria there and really just kind of weed it out. The big thing that it's going to want to know is which bank account are we using? Okay. And then the payment date is very important. It is going to have to match the check date when we process the checks. Right now, we're just creating the payments as the AP user. I'm going to leave this defaulted as today. I'll leave this post date defaulted as today too, because I want to know what date I made those payments. Again, your internal business processes, you may want to change that to the last business day. That's okay. That's up to you. Just remember that this payment date needs to be the same as the check date when you go to process the payments. And we'll see that when we get to processing those. All right, and then we'll select our payment method as system check. And this is the one that gives us the PDF output that we can print. So when I click on my list tab, you can see this is everything that met that criteria that's due for payment. So these are posted vendor invoices that are due to be paid within that time frame that I set in my criteria. So the one thing I want you to know once we create these payments, and let's go ahead and I want to leave some for us to do later. So let's just grab a couple of these. And create the payments. Green is good. When we go to our list, I want you to see that these are in an in-use status. So system checks will be created in an in-use status, and they will skip the submitted status. That trips all of us up. I don't know how many times I did this before. I got it through my head that the system check skips the submitted status. This is the only financial document that does that. So just make a note where you're doing system check, it is going to skip the submitted status. So Victor Voucher's work is almost done. He's created the system checks. Now he's going to go create some ACH payments. So back to my bulk vendor payment creation, let me go ahead and send my due date forward here. And I'll select my operating bank account, and I'm going to leave my dates as is. Again, that's up to you if you feel like you want to change them. And then for my drop down, ACH vendor payment. The important thing on anything that has a system payment type of other, you want to check this box in the transaction options area down here that says submit payments after creation. And we'll see why in just a minute. Okay, you want them to be in a submitted status. So I've hit my criteria here, and there's, again, everything that's available that meets my criteria. I'll go ahead and just, you can select everything if you want, or I'll leave a few things for us in case we want to play around later, and just do 3 of these. Okay, and create the payments. Green is good. And let's go look at them. You see these are in a submitted status. If I had not checked that submit payments after creation box that I just showed you, these would all be created in a submitted, in an in-use status, and you would have to individually go in and submit them. And you might have 100 payments here. You don't want to do that. Trust me, you don't want to do that. So please keep in mind on that search tab when you're creating ACH or any kind of payment that is a payment type of other, you want to check that box so that they're in a submitted status, they're ready for your poster to post. Okay? All right, so I think Victor Voucher's work is done here. Let's go ahead. I'm going to log out as Victor, and we're going to log in as the AP poster, Susie Supervisor. Okay? So Susie is actually also our AP admin. You can see she has the administrator dashboard here. She's only got those few things we talked about, the bank accounts and payment methods that are available for her. So first, let's post that vendor invoice that was created by Victor, or any outstanding vendor invoices. So again, this is your search tab. You know, we added one earlier when we were in as Victor. This is your search tab, and I can really filter this so many different ways. Right now, I want to pull up everything that's ready to post. In fact, I don't want to just do this today. I'm going to want to do this every day, right? The easy way to do that is just take everything from beginning of time to end of time and make your status submitted. So you want everything that's ready to post and save the criteria. So when you do that, just name it something. AP, I'm going to say AP Vendor Invoices, ready to post. And I'll put this on a couple different dashboards so it's handy for me. So I can either click my list here, or now I have that every day. I can go to my list on my home dashboard, my financials dashboard, and pull up everything that's ready to post, everything that's out there. In this case, we only have the one that Victor created, which is fine. I can go in and view this vendor invoice and look at the details of it. I can go in and view that attachment. Hopefully it doesn't take forever. Oh, there it is. And oh, look, they're on right away. Sorry, I cracked myself up. So we can go in and see the vendor invoice and make sure that it makes sense with what is entered into the system and that everything has been entered correctly. Okay, so back to our list. If you had many here, you could click that and post those all at once. And let's go ahead and post. You know what? Before we post, just for fun, I'm going to go look at our AP Aging Report. And the Aging Reports, as you saw, was available on my reports dashboard. Let me go a little slower. And has various criteria. I like to leave it, you know, the default date is today and the age by date is the due date. I like that, so I'm just going to run it. And we can see everything that's outstanding and how many days past due. Our amount right now is $35,310.40. Once I post this, and again, green is good, and I can see that if I do my posted status from the list there. Ooh, there's a whole lot of stuff, but there it is at the top, 330. And now when I refresh my aging report, you can see now that I have that highway software invoice from today has been added to our aging, and our aging amount has increased by the $3,300. Okay, so there's our invoices. Let's go ahead and go post our payments, process our payments. And you can see that Susie has a little more on her menu here now because she's an AP poster as well as an AP admin. Well, let's go. She needs to post the payments and process the payments that Victor created. So I'm going to go look for those. So similar to what we did earlier, I want to see all the payments that are out there. In fact, give me everything in an in-use and a submitted status. I want to see everything that's available. So you can see our system checks, the bottom three here, are in an in-use status. And I can't post those from here. Oops, I can go back, I can go look at them, but I can't post them. And the reason for that is that we have some additional processing options to select. So that's okay. Our ACH payments are in a submitted status. Let's go ahead. We've already reviewed those, let's say, and we can go ahead and post those ACH payments. Whew, that was so easy. That was awesome. Okay, so, but for our system checks, we do have some other things that we need to select here. So on your search tab, you would say, give me everything that's out there that's in an in-use status, as our system checks are. Oh, look at that. I want to print checks. I want to tell the system what bank account to use. And the check date, this is the date that has to match the payment date that Victor used when he created the payments. I left that as today. Hopefully I'm not creating the payments today and processing them next week, but if that's the case, you just have to make sure those dates match. You also see when I selected the operating account that the check number defaulted in. The system knows which check was most recently used, and it's going to bring in that next number there. Okay? So here, this gives me everything I've got. Again, I can go look at these. Let's assume I've already gone and looked at everything, and I can go ahead and generate the checks. Very easy. Where's my easy button? All right, so let's take a look at the PDF that contains those checks. I would recommend saving this off to a server or a shared drive if you have one, but you do have the ability to reprint these checks if you need to later on. So the auditor comes and says, show me the copy of this check. You can go in and reprint that check run. But here's what it looks like. Let's make it a little bit bigger. So you can see the check itself and then the stub there. Okay, so that's what your checks are going to look like, and you'll print those out on your DLT 104 format check stock. See your first and last check number here, the total amount of all the checks. The check continuation report is only if you have a check that has many, many invoices on it and they don't all fit on the stub, then the remainder would be on this check continuation report. So I say, okay, let's go ahead and process them. It's still not too late if something crazy happened. Let's say as you were reviewing that PDF file, you noticed an error. And so you say, oh, I need to void check number 58 or 58 and 59 or whatever. Or maybe you put the check stock in upside down, which never happens, right? But unfortunately, you're going to have to void all those and redo them. That's okay. You can do that. Or in our case, we're going to say, yep, everything looks good, and I want to go ahead and complete this process. So as soon as I check this button to say complete check generation, this is going to post automatically. So I don't even have a separate posting process, which is awesome. Okay, so green is good. Let's go back and look at our, let's pull up our aging again. Whew, we paid some stuff. So look at that. We're looking in pretty good shape here. We paid, you know, almost $30,000 worth of payments altogether between the ACH and the system checks. So that's great. Not owing too much. So you saw with vendor invoices and vendor payments how easy it was to enter information through the user interface. But remember, you can also import that information. You know, a system administrator would import that in either an end use or a submitted status. So you have that import functionality available also. So that was the basics of vendor payments. Again, if you have additional questions, put them in the questions box or reach out to your customer success manager. We'll definitely follow up with you. I do want to show you as I mentioned earlier, the administrator roles don't usually have, you know, transactions in part of their functionality. There's a few exceptions to that. In this case, Susie Supervisor has the You can see if she goes to her preferences, she has the AP poster and the AP administrator role. So she's able to actually go in and create vendor invoices from employee and subcontractor expense reports. So super easy process. So you see on her menu, it says create vendor invoices from expense reports. And again, I can filter by criteria. I can do this by person or by a specific voucher or approval group, or I just want to grab everything that's out there. Anything that's available. Again, document date, post date, whatever makes sense to you, go ahead and populate those dates. And I'll click my list here and see what's out there. Now I might have some things that were created earlier. That's okay. I'm still going to post them this month because maybe that period is closed already or something. So I've got 4 expense vouchers that I have vendors created for those employees, and I've associated their vendor profile with the person record. So there's a link between the organization, the vendor organization, and the person. And I can, with a click of a button, here we go, create vendor invoices from those expense reports. So you can see that these are created in a submitted status. They're ready for posting. There's a couple things I want you to note on this particular process. You see how incredibly easy that was to create those. And then I can go ahead, since I have the access, if I wanted to, I could go ahead and post those as well. Expense reports must be in a locked or extracted status in order to be available to create a vendor invoice from them. That's 1. 2, as I just mentioned, if you plan to pay your employees out of Unanet for expense reports, you want to set up a vendor organization with a vendor profile, and you associate that on the person record on the expense tab. So if you're looking in your own system right now, you'll see that field on the expense tab that says vendor organization. And if you void a vendor invoice, so if I took one of these and posted it and then voided this Abe Lincoln invoice, unfortunately, the expense report does not pop back up the next time I go to do this process. So you would have to manually create that invoice in order to pay Abe Lincoln. So that was pretty easy. I don't know if you can hear it. Can you hear my easy button?
That was easy.
Hopefully you were able to hear that. But with one click, we created many vendor invoices from employee expense reports. So that's very awesome. And I know it was fast, but please, again, jot down any questions you have. We'll take a look at those. I really want to move on to accounts receivable. Let me check my time here. Okay, we're speeding through. All right, so we're going to log in now as our AR user, Debbie Deposit. And we're just going to do a basic customer payment. So we've received a check from customer 2, and it says it's for payment of 2 invoices. So we're going to go ahead and just enter this into Unanet. So I will go to my financials menu, accounts receivable, customer payments. Once again, I'm adding a new document, so I would do the add function. I'll just put in which bank account that's going into. Again, the character string, and this customer will not pop up unless they have a customer profile created. And my payment amount was $37.42.49. Again, description is up to you, whatever you think needs to go here. In my case, I'm going to abbreviate. I saw that they noted which invoices this was for, so I'm just going to pop those into the description. In this case, it's a check deposit. Now you see, as soon as I popped in the customer, their balance populated here. You'll see if I change this to customer 1, that's a different balance, right? But customer 2 is the one we're looking for, and their balance populates as soon as you put in the customer. If you have a check deposit, it will make you put a check number in there, which makes sense. And repeating myself once again, document date, post date, whatever makes sense to you here. The post date is going to drive the fiscal period for the general ledger posting. Okay, so once we save this, it's assigned a system document number for doc type CP, customer payment. Very consistent across the financial screens. You see my summary information and then my menu over here. Here we have a paid documents menu item. So this is going to show us a list of all the outstanding invoices for this customer for all projects. So we can, pull up one or however many, are associated with this payment. So they did give us, it makes it really easy because they told us which ones this was for. So you see my balance is still the payment amount here, once I select number 104, then it changes, it applies that and changes my balance. And you can see the total here, 342.49. And then when I select the next one, you can see very neatly that the balance is 0. Now you also have the opportunity, if you have discount terms set up, or if you need to do a write-off for any reason, you would change the payment amount here and do the write-off here. So if, you know, I could change this to 30,000 and put a write-off in of $400 there. And then behind the scenes setup, that will all go to the appropriate general ledger accounts once it's posted. So a couple things to note here. You can absolutely, if you don't know which invoices it applies to, you could submit this. You could even post it and come back and apply the invoices later. Because how many times do you get a payment in and it's this big dollar amount and there's probably 12 invoices associated with it, but you don't know which 12 out of 20 outstanding, right? That never happens. But you're able to enter the information if you want to, not apply anything or apply only some of it, and that's easy to do as well. So let's go ahead and submit that. And you can see once again, it saved some of my information from my previous entry there. So I just very quickly want to show you what that looks like if you have something that has an outstanding balance. So you can see I've got an in-use one here. I've got a little green plus sign here, and I had a payment of $125. I've applied $27,000 to it, and you can see the balance of $97. So you would just click in here and do exactly what I did on the last one. So that's what that looks like if you ever run into that situation. Of course, you can import in either an in-use or a submitted status, you know, by the system administrator. And if we have time at the end, we'll come back and do a deposit. For now, I want to go ahead and post this so you can see what that looks like. So we'll go in as Parker Poster, and we want to leave plenty of time for questions. So let's look at our aging report. And again, I like that criteria, so I'm just going to run it. And you can see my aging report, customers owe us $582 as of right now. Yikes. We need to get some of that money in the door. So let me go ahead and same thing that Susie Supervisor did, Parker could save the criteria and just pull up everything that's ready to post and have that list easily available on any of his dashboards. In this case, we have this payment that Debbie Deposit entered for $30,742. So we could go in and view the details on that and see exactly which projects and which invoices that relates to. And hopefully everybody does that. They review it before they post it. And when I refresh my report, now my aging is down. Instead of 582, it's 551 because we've posted that customer payment, so it comes off of the aging. The other report we haven't really looked at, the Accounts Receivable and Accounts Payable Activity. I'm going to back this up a little bit because I am in my test environment, and so I've got some interesting, data in here. But we could go to today. You can use, whatever date you like. You can certainly filter by any criteria. But the activity reports will include both invoices and payments, and there's one of these on the vendor side as well. And so you can see both the customer invoices, which is document type CI, and the customer payments, document type CP, in the same place, which is kind of awesome. So if they wanted, you could export this to a PDF. You could run it by a specific customer. Let's say I only wanted customer 1. You could filter by that, save it as a PDF, and send it out to them and say, here's all of your activity. All right. I know that was really fast. There's a lot to cover in AP and AR. Let's quickly go through just a couple of additional transactions on the vendor side. Recurring vendor invoice. If you have rent, utilities, or something that you pay every month, enter the number of recurrences, check the recurring box, and then the next occurrence will be created in the next fiscal period as soon as this one is posted, and that'll be in an in-use status. You can go in and make changes if you need to. The copy function, as I mentioned, is available from any status for vendor invoices. Your check print history, if you forget to save off that copy of that PDF, you are able to go in and reprint your check run if you need to, and that's through the accounts payable menu, the check print history. Positive pay and ACH templates are available. We do provide those for sending that information over to the bank. Just please note, you're almost definitely going to have to change these templates based on your specific configuration in your system. So this is a good starting point for you. So a few pieces of additional functionality on the AP side. You can change the pay name, nickel and dime, there for dime holdings. That's our pay name. I still crack myself up. You can hold payments at the vendor level on their profile or at the individual invoice level, as we saw earlier. And if you want to create a separate payment for each invoice, you can do that. I don't see that very often, but you certainly can do that. If you have something that you don't want to go through that bulk payment process that we just reviewed, you can absolutely create a vendor payment, and you would just enter the debit account information on the details tab in that case. On the AR side, you would use a combination of the deposits and customer payments functionality to record deposit in an undeposited funds account. And again, that just facilitates an easier bank reconciliation because it's going to show up as one lump sum on your bank rec. And so that way we can kind of, you know, have everything we need in both places, one on the customer payments side and two on the bank rec side. The unpost functionality. I would absolutely recommend void functionality if you make an error because you have an audit trail in the general ledger, right? You have the in, you have the out. There can be exception situations where, for example, a transaction needs to be kind of unwound. So in that case, a system admin could perform an unpost of the customer payment, assuming that your system property settings are set up to allow this. It does not leave an audit trail. Let me repeat that. It does not leave an audit trail. So you really have to consider carefully the impacts before you proceed with an unpost. So for anyone, again, who's ever been in my classes, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So very quick recap on what we've covered here today. We looked at roles, we looked at document statuses and workflow, we looked at transactions and reporting, and of course some of the underlying setup so that all of these things are working correctly. All right, I know I was talking fast. I'm sorry, there was a lot to get through, but now, yay, it's time for your questions. I can't wait to see what questions you have. Patty, how's our question box looking?
So actually we have quite a few questions.
Okay.
Good questions. So the first question is there an audit trail to identify who entered a voucher, customer payment, etc.?
Absolutely. Let me show you that. So let's say customer payment, it's also on the vendor side. You have on your search screen that you can, you know, show all these things. So I can show who did everything. Let's look at everything for this year. I'm not sure what data we have in the system, but I can see if I want to look for somebody in particular, I can fill out these fields down here, filters, or I can just say, show me everybody who. So that's my column option, show created by, modified as submitted and posted. So in that case, you can see for my transactions, most of them are Chris Controller. I have this one created by Debbie Deposit and then posted by Parker Poster. And that is also on your AP and on the general ledger. You have that available.
Okay, you ready for the next question?
I'm ready.
Okay, if the voucher is for a bill from a subcontractor, where do the hours get input?
So a lot of what we see is the subcontractors. So you're talking about a vendor invoice voucher, yes?
Correct.
Okay, so in that case, and let me actually go in as the controller so I have all access so we can see anything. Until purchasing comes out, there's not a separate field for the hours. You certainly could put that in your description. when purchasing comes out in that next big release, that will have, you know, the quantity or units or whatever it's going to be called, that field for the hours. Okay, next one.
Okay. When entering vendor invoices, how can you enter an invoice that's not attached to a project as a one-time thing?
Yeah, you can absolutely enter that as a one-time thing. So if I have Joe Landlord for $1,000, let me just quickly throw some data in here. And when I go to my details, and I'll do facilities rent. So as long as the account setup for this general ledger account code says don't use a project, then I have no project there. And that's just my generic. Does that answer your question? I hope.
Okay. How did you get the, I'm sorry, you ready?
Yep, I'm ready.
How did you get the legal entity to default to MyCo? I have to select my company every time I run a report, enter a payment, customer payment, etc.
I believe because I only have one legal entity, you must have more legal entities in your system.
Okay.
So let me look at my list. Yes, I only have one little entity in my test environment. If you only have one, it will default. If you have more than one, unfortunately, you'll have to select it. Yes.
Okay. Next question. Is it possible to add an invoice to a vendor payment list after you're done with your selection for payment?
So you're creating the payment and you want to associate it with the invoice after the fact? Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I think
let me see. Let me see what we have out there. Okay, so we have highway software for that's already paid though. Sorry, give me 1 second. Oh, current year. Okay, so let's say 15.5 higher net, or what's on my aging? Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm trying to find so I can show you what that looks like. Let's see what's outstanding. All right, so I've got Cigna 475 for 2,700. Okay, so if I go to Accounts Payable and I want to create this vendor payment for Cigna, I can go to this paid documents. So before we went to, if you were creating this like as a tax payment, you would go to details and put in your general ledger account code. But if you're just creating one payment, you know you have a vendor invoice in there, you click on this paid documents menu item, and there's my invoice that I can associate with that. And submit or post or save or whatever. Okay? That's how you get there.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we'll do one more question. For invoices from expense reports, where can we review the general ledger accounts that they'll be posted to?
So in your reports, so what happens when you post those vendor invoices, it's going to debit the liability account that is set up in your behind the scenes in your posting groups for your expense report offset. The expenses themselves, your travel, airfare, hotel, all of those things are going to hit the general ledger on the expense report cost post. So if I go to my general ledger details and I do EC for expense report cost post, and again, my apologies, I'm not sure in the system how much data we have. Let's try the current year and see if that gets us anything. Okay, so I can see there's my expense report liability that has the credit side. This is the account that's going to be debited when we post our vendor invoice. But the expenses themselves are going to be part of the expense report cost post, which is a totally separate process that happens by the GL admin. So there's my hotel, my meals, my airfare, auto, all of the expenses, all of my debits. But those are, if you have ability to view the GL details, you can see those in the GL.
Okay, great. Well, we have a lot more questions. And so as we're coming up here on time, I just want to let everybody know that all of your questions will be sent to your CSMs, and your CSMs will be reaching out to you with your answers.
Yes, I'm glad we have a lot of questions. I'm sad that we don't have more time to go through them. But I really, really appreciate all that. They were all very good questions, and I'm happy that I was able to answer them all because I certainly don't know everything.